All right, it's time for another update and forecast on the park fire, and we do have some new perimeter data to look at that's fairly interesting. So, again, here's the park fire perimeter on the northern, western, and southern side of this fire. We've barely seen any activity recently. It's all been on this northeastern finger that we've had extending up the Mill Creek drainage over the last couple of days. And yesterday, we certainly had a lot of activity on it. I actually have a video from yesterday afternoon where you see that rotating column. This is just south of Mineral. Keep in mind, this is a time-lapse video, so while that looks like a tornado, if you were there in person, it would be rotating on much more slowly. But still, that is evidence of some extreme fire behavior out there. And unfortunately, we're expecting more of that throughout the day today because it's going to be, once again, exceptionally dry, and then we have abundant fuels in this area that haven't seen a lot of fire history in a long time. Now, the first thing that I want to do, though, we'll turn off modus and veers here so it's the perimeter only, because I think this is the most important part of this video. And it's if we turn on structures here, that's Mineral, and that's Mill Creek. And you can see how much the fire extended overnight and into this morning. So that's the largest change that we've seen. I don't believe all of this is just the fire itself. I do believe they were doing a firing operation to try to protect these communities, and then it looks like that may be merged with the fire perimeter itself. If you look at modus and veers, it actually gives you a little indication where you had that heat out there. I don't know if that was a spot fire or a firing operation or exactly what happened, but it definitely looks like the fire is extended a lot from where it was yesterday. So where it was yesterday, we can actually come back to Google Earth over here and then just kind of getting our bearings again. There's Mineral up towards the north, and they did have a firing operation at one point. I don't have that fire perimeter on there, but you can still kind of see it on the eastern edge of the fire right here. And then they did the firing operation just to the south of Mill Creek Resort. So basically the idea there is that if the fire then bumps up into where they've already burnt the fuels out, then there's no more fuels. So then the fire just stops in its tracks. And this did go all the way along 172 right here. You can actually see 172 a bit better on this map. So as I'm talking about 172, it would be good for us to kind of see where that firing operation was yesterday. See how it comes up the east side, and then it came all the way along right here, but that's the clear evidence that it passed over that overnight last night and then into this morning. And we already were hearing some reports of some spot fires jumping over the firing operation yesterday. It's basically two things that were happening when we were watching this yesterday afternoon. One is that we'd gotten a spot fire over here on the west side, and then that was kind of going outside of where they'd done some of the firing operations, but they were just blasting that with air attack just all day long. They had multiple very large air tankers on it. And then what happened was some burning embers jump over 172 in the firing operation, and then it's been going what looks to be right there. It was rushing uphill. So that's part of the challenge. They had a pretty bad hand with this fire because 172 is kind of in the middle of the slope, and you would like to have your firing operation be on the top of a ridge because fire likes to go uphill. You can also get winds going upslope in the afternoons. So it's hard to hold a firing operation that's going to be in the middle of a slope because just like we saw yesterday, you get some burning embers that just toss over it. And then those burning embers start new fires into the exceptionally dry fuels because of a lot of the heat that we've had recently. And then it's able to quickly go uphill. So then, basically what happened overnight, filling in the dots here, is this fire now looks to have gone in between where you see Mill Creek Resort right there and Mineral. So that's what we were looking at yesterday, or I should say last night. And then now when we look at the map, Mill Creek's right there. The fire looks to be basically sandwiching Mill Creek, where it doesn't look like the fire perimeter has actually gone into those communities, or those where you see that street view right there. And then the same is true for Mineral over here. You have your streets and your structures, And then the fire, I was actually thinking this could happen yesterday, that when we saw that it was such a southwesterly wind and that we had a lot of heat right there, that we were hoping it would just steer towards the east of Mineral. And then they're also kind of steering it with the air attack yesterday. What I was really worried about is how they were going to steer it around Mill Creek. But that's where all of the resources that we have on this fire came in handy, because just looking at those, we have over 6,000 personnel, 37 helicopters, over 500 engines. And what they were doing in that favorable week of weather was preparing Mineral and Mill Creek, because they saw this coming. They knew this. The northeastern side was the most active part of the fire. And then when we look at fire history, we'll turn structures off for just a moment. There's no fire history in this area. So they knew, okay, we have some favorable weather. This is last week. And then there's going to be some hotter, drier weather later in the forecast. We got to get these communities ready because it's still active on the northeasterly side, and we have a lot of fuels here that haven't burnt out in decades. And they took a lot of those personnel, those resources, those dozers. How many dozers? Let's see. 190 dozers. And then they just put primary, secondary contingency lines just all over the place. Looks like more so around the Mill Creek area than what we're seeing around Mineral. But again, that's where those southwesterly winds actually ended up helping us yesterday afternoon in steering this a bit more, it looks like, towards the northeast. You can imagine a lot of the personnel on the ground had something to do with that. And the fact that the winds calmed down overnight probably helped calm some of the fire behavior during the overnight hours. Now, I can't exactly say that, though, because if you look at the fire, it'll loop back in just a moment. Even overnight, we were still seeing a lot of heat on the fire. So that's why the fire clearly continued to spread. And then what we would like to see is the smoke just settle over the fire, create a lot of shading, so then we don't warm up or dry out too much today. But it looks like we're starting to see actually more orange on that map, at least until that cloud starts to obstruct our view right there. So to fill in those dots, we can kind of actually look at what it's looked like. You see how active it was this morning. If you missed that, that's as the sun is rising, and we're already seeing that much activity on the fire. That's actually worse than we were seeing in previous mornings. Actually, it looks like it already breaks through the inversion as the sun is basically just coming up. And then in the last, I would say within the last hour, it seems to have picked up in activity a lot. So it was just kind of chugging along throughout most of the morning. I was keeping an eye on it. And then watch as we get into the last hour of this loop right here. You're going to see it kind of punch through that inversion again. And then we already have one of those big pyrocumulus clouds, which is, again, more active than what we were seeing in previous days. And I believe that a big part of that is because of how dry it is. So that maybe could be a good thing to go to, is just check out some of the weather that we're dealing with here. So we have Mineral right there, Mill Creek. You notice Mineral, 70 degrees. If we look at the min relative humidity, 45%. So it does look like Mineral is getting some shading from the smoke that came in over the fire. You can see how all that smoke just sort of settled over Mineral right there. And that's keeping them cooler with more moisture than they otherwise would be. But if you look at Mill Creek, I'm recording this right now, it's 11:56. And it's already showing a max temperature of 86 degrees and a min relative humidity of 9%. So anytime you see relative humidity in the teens, you know it's going to be an active fire day. So the fact that we're already in the single digits and it's not even the peak of the afternoon yet, usually the hottest, driest part of the day is going to be 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And sorry, I need to clear my throat. I've been doing so much talking this week, doing my job as a broadcast meteorologist and then also nonstop wildfire coverage on the park fire, because it's been very active over the last 2 days. It basically woke back up again, and then now it looks like it might even be more active today than what we were seeing in the last 2 days. I mean, comparatively speaking, this is around the same time I did my updates in previous mornings and early afternoons. And we were not seeing that kind of activity yesterday. Like if you watch my updates from the last 2 mornings around 11:30, it was still kind of in that chugging along phase that we were looking at earlier. We certainly weren't seeing pyrocumulus clouds yet. So a big part of the reason for that, again, is because we were so dry overnight. So this is Lassen Lodge, California. I believe it's just south of Mineral, but apparently this spot didn't get as good of smoke shading, because if you look at the temperature, air temperature mean, here's going to be 1 a.m. right there. It stayed in the low 70s overnight, and at 1 a.m. we had a 9% relative humidity. And then usually you see the moisture increase overnight as the temperatures go down, and you'd like it to go up to maybe 60%, 70%, 80%. Some of that moisture finds its way into the fuels and it really calms down the fire behavior, kind of sets you up in a better position as you get into the day. Mean relative humidity only went up to 16% at 9 a.m. And then you see we start to quickly heat up. It's already up to 90 degrees at this weather station, and mean relative humidity again showing 9% right there. So this is an overall trend that we've seen happening over the last few days, where when we had all that great smoke shading last week, it was, warm, but not exceptionally hot. Seems like every single day since then we've just been getting hotter. So that's your temperature August 4th, August 5th, August 6th, and then today looks like those temperatures are quickly going up, and we started at a much higher temperature than we started yesterday. And then what's been more important for fire activity over the last couple of days, because winds haven't actually been the driver of the fire activity the last 2 days. It certainly was at the beginning of this fire. If you remember, when this fire first started, right around Chico, it just took off almost all the way to Manton in a few days. It was going about 10 to 15 miles per day, burning up about 4,000 to 5,000 acres per hour at one point. And a lot of that, there's a lot of factors that were working against us there. It was hot, it was dry, there's a lot of fuels in here that hadn't seen any fire history in decades. But a big part of the reason we had such fast growth to the north was we had those strong southerly winds that were even staying consistent overnight. Whereas this growth that we've seen recently, that's shown in the more orange to red color, blue represents your growth at the beginning of this fire, the first week, and then the orange to red is where some of the more recent activity has been. A lot of this isn't so much due to wind, but it's due to still the abundant fuels that have a lack of fire history. But even more so, it's what we've been seeing happening to that relative humidity. Remember, we had that monsoonal moisture move in. It looks like August 3rd, August 4th. We even got a little drizzle over the fire. We were looking great at that point. There was very little growth over this last weekend. And then that moisture moved out, and ever since then, we've been drying out. And not only drying out in the afternoons, but not seeing any moisture move in during the overnight hours. So relative humidity today looks to be the lowest it's been in the last week, and it's still not even to the hottest, driest part of the afternoon. Winds, again, weren't all that strong yesterday, but it does look like it's starting to come up a bit today. I'm actually curious to see if we do have any winds right now. Nah, it's just around 6 miles per hour. That's the red number that I'm looking at right there. And then just looking at the weather forecast for today and tomorrow, and actually tonight's going to be very important as well. So today, once again, up into the 90s. We're actually already in the 90s in some spots, it looks like, and it's only 12. Relative humidity dropping in. We're already in the single digits, so I don't know how much drier we can get than that. The main thing that I want to point out, though, is this darker column. So that's today. That's tonight. Doesn't look like we're going to have a good moisture recovery tonight. So once again, it's going to remain dry, which seems to be what allowed a lot of that activity last night to happen, where on that satellite imagery, we're still seeing it in the orange during the overnight hours. So just looking at tomorrow's forecast, again, I think we should just focus on today because there's enough ahead of us at the moment to think about. But tomorrow, once again, hot and dry. Although maybe not as dry as we're going to be throughout the day today. So just coming back to this map, I want to just emphasize kind of what the biggest concerns are right now. I'm going to go perimeters only at this point. You can see where all that growth has been over the last couple of days. And a big part of the reason for that is it's been burning in basically in this canyon during the afternoons. I'm saying winds haven't been a huge factor on this fire, but you can get stronger winds within your canyon right there. And it actually looks like that has kind of been steering the fire over the last couple of days towards the northeast. But we've also just had a predominant southwesterly flow recently. And if I zoom out here, we look at wind plot, let's go to this afternoon. You're going to see those southwesterly winds that are going to continue to try to push the fire towards the northeast. And then if we turn on structures here, that's where you're going to be able to see kind of where the two main concerns are. We have Mineral off to the west here, and then you have Mill Creek kind of tucked in between the fire perimeter at this point. So that looks to be the main fire. That looks to be the firing operation. So, I mean, I don't want to be too optimistic here, but perhaps the greatest danger has passed for Mill Creek. Again, I'm only as good as the information that I have to work with, but right there, that would maybe paint the picture that the fire moved very close to Mill Creek last night and into this morning, but then it's moved up towards the north of them now. And now we just have fuels cleared out on both sides of Mill Creek, and we're maybe in a good position there. And then maybe a similar story for Mineral. We're going to continue to see those southwesterly winds as we get into this afternoon, which would, again, just basically push this fire up into the Dixie fire burn scar, where it will hopefully slow down. We will most likely see more growth in this area because that's going to be fuels that weren't cleared out in the Dixie fire burn scar. And just looking at the color there, that looks like some dark green, so it does look like there's a lot of fuel in that location. But again, if they have a lot of air attack, it's going to be hard to do air attack here today just because it looks like there's so much smoke. But over Mineral, it also looks like there's so much smoke that we have remained we have a lot more moisture over this area right now, so we wouldn't have as active of fire behavior there. So hopefully what we're seeing on these cameras, where it just looks exceptionally active, especially for this time of the day, hopefully that's just this section right there that is now getting ready to burn into the Dixie fire burn scar. But what's also very hard to tell is when we look at like the Modus and Veers, where it was picking up on the heat, it almost seemed like it was in two different sections. This main section, and then that section that I thought was a firing operation at first, but I haven't been able to find any information about that. But perhaps the firing operation and the main fire kind of combined together. And then I'm not exactly sure where all of that smoke is coming off at the moment. So, yeah, not exactly sure what the threat to Mill Creek and Mineral is at this point. Let's just update WatchDude to see if there has been any recent information there. Sometimes you can also pick up information based on where the different helicopters and tankers are. Something, I definitely should have said earlier in this video, is if you are a local, definitely stay updated with your evacuation orders and warnings, because this is, again, one of those situations that seems to be changing very quickly. So it looks like all the helicopters are over on this western side of that finger right now. And I'd imagine the reason they're not around Mineral or Mill Creek is I think there's just too much smoke to work with right there. Although you do see some of those paths getting a little bit closer towards Mineral at the moment. And then I didn't update the acreage yet in this video, but it looks like we're up to 425,000 acres. We're still at number 4 on largest wildfires in the history of California. Mendocino Complex is 460. We'll see if we pass that throughout the day today. Again, just based on what it's looked like over the last hour, does look like it's potentially more active than yesterday. And where I'd be predicting the largest amount of growth let's just go to Modus and Viewers, where it'd be predicting the largest amount of growth would be maybe up here, because looks like they're hitting this west side with air attack. They're going to continue to try to steer that around Mineral. Hopefully Mill Creek is now in that little protective pocket. It looks like they're covered from that imagery, but if we actually zoom in there, again, looks like they might be actually surrounded by burnt out fuels at this point, but where the fire could potentially still go is up towards the north. The exception that kind of just popped up into my head, though, is if this was a firing operation earlier this morning, and again, I haven't been able to figure out if it was or not, and then they were to burn those fuels back towards the main fire, then as the main fire gets there, those fuels would already be burnt out. So then it wouldn't be able to make a big rush and then basically be able to chew up all of this fuel right here that has no fire history. Again, Dixie Fire is going to provide some benefit if it tries to move towards the east. I think the biggest question mark is whether that was a spot fire or whether that was a firing operation, because that's going to have major impacts on how this fire ends up growing throughout the day today. So with that, I think the only thing we can do is continue to watch this, and that's definitely what I'm going to be doing, but I think at this point that's about as much information that we have to work with, and I'll definitely do another update as we get into this afternoon and I'm able to provide more information, but that's all I got for you right now. Hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully we dodged a bullet in Mill Creek and Mineral, but I think it's a bit too early to say right now. So as more information comes in, I'll let you guys know, and thanks for watching.